Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are getting settled and started. I hope everybody had a good lunch break and got a little time to decompress. I'm going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Khulud Beg. I work with the Women's National Housing and Homelessness Network, but I'm here today in capacity of the moderator and supporting all of the beautiful people up there on the stage to present and then also facilitate a conversation with all of the people here and the people that are presenting. I would like to start off with acknowledging that we are here today, gathered here today in Ottawa, the unceded, stolen, unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin people. We're gathered here for this session that highlights innovative support for Indigenous women and gender diverse peoples experiencing homelessness. The first presentation that we're going to have today is going to be called Preventing the Predictable, using technology alongside an Indigenous women's safe house to reduce the number of MMI W2S from the homelessness community. This presentation is being presented by McKenzie Rebecca Anhalt from the Brandon Neighbourhood Renewal Corporation. The second presentation we have today would be Finding Shore, presented by Shannon, Johansen, and Janine Sleiman. And all of these people are going to be able to introduce themselves as well. So I'm just doing a very brief introduction. These folks are from Highbanks Independent Living for Parenting Youth Society. And then the third presentation we have today is Overpoliced and Underprotected from Renee, Sanderson, and Jasmine from the Yellowknife Women's Society. We're really excited to have all of you here today. Once people are done presenting, we're going to have questions that we will be able to bring the mic to anybody in the room. I do recommend that if you are asking question of a particular speaker, please make sure to write who you're asking the question to, because we'll come to the questions at the end of all three presentations. I'm not going to take any more time, and I'm going to pass it to the first set of speakers.
Hello there, my name is Dr. Megan McKenzie, and I'm the lead researcher with the Action Research on Chronic Homelessness project out of Brandon, Manitoba.
My name is Rebecca Anhalt. I'm the Highbanks coordinator with Brandon Neighbourhood Renewal Corporation out of Brandon, Manitoba.
So I want you to imagine a really big mountain, and this mountain has a sheer face on it. And along that sheer face on this really big mountain is a little ledge. And this little ledge is narrow and along the edge of this mountain, quite high up. And you look up and you see a whole bunch of people lined up along this little ledge trying to make their way along the ledge. And they're trying to grab at the wall, but the wall is crumbly and the stone is rotten and is pulling loose on them. And they're trying to move along, but there's wet moss underneath their feet that's slipping and sliding under their feet. And the wind is coming up, and scree and other rocks are falling off the top of the cliff down on them, and night's starting to set in, and it's getting cold, and it's getting dark, and their feet start to slip off the edge. What's going to happen next to those folks? What do you think is going to happen to them? And for me, when we look at our Indigenous women in Manitoba who are living unhoused, that's basically how I feel like I've been watching for 25 years. I've been watching their feet slip, them scrambling, trying to hang on in the most impossible, dangerous of situations. And so we've been working on trying to figure out if we can predict what's going to happen in that scenario of the cliff, how come we can't predict and prevent what's happening with our women? And so when we see risk factors, in the same way that we're seeing risk factors like wind and rain and crumbling rock and narrow ledges and the night and the cold, all those risk factors, if we could find those same risk factors that are endangering our Indigenous women, we could identify who's at highest risk. And if we can figure out who's at highest risk, we can intervene and prevent their preventable deaths or them becoming missing and murdered like too many women have in our province. And for me, I've been watching for 25 years now, since I started as an outreach worker. And so I've watched, it's now in the hundreds of women essentially fall off the cliff. And so today's presentation is going to be talking about using technology and risk factors to identify those women, using these women's own ideas and their clever thoughts about how to prevent it in order to prevent it, and how to wrap them in protective factors using traditional methods so that they're able to be safer and not fall off that cliff. Get them off, do that emergency mountain rescue and scoop them off of that impossible, dangerous situation that they're in. Because us standing at the bottom of the cliff yelling, "Be careful, don't slip," is not going to change the situation. They're in an impossible situation, and we need to intervene more substantially. So Rebecca's going to talk a little bit about some of those risk factors that we use to essentially predict who's going to die next in order to intervene. Oh, I was supposed to do a timeline first. So this is a little bit more about how we came to do this. So we had a fully integrated coordinated access system in Brandon, Manitoba as of 2019, just in time for COVID. So when we first found that COVID was happening was the first time I started doing predictions about who was at highest risk of death. But that was different with COVID because we were looking at things like organ failure or advanced age, things like that. And then the people that we thought were at highest risk, we pulled them off the street out of shelters first and put them into hotel rooms. By 2020, the fall of 2020, I started looking at risk factors for some of our elderly folks on the street. And by the spring of 2023 is when I realized that we could use these same predictive factors for identifying our Indigenous women using the HIFIS database. So for anyone who's not familiar, HIFIS is the homeless database that we use to store information about our homeless folks that many of you here also use. And so that was the first time I'd actually tried to do predictions on murder and missing, women at risk of murder and becoming murder and missing. And with less than 3 weeks later, out of the 10 or 12 names that I pulled as my top risks, we found her body by the railway tracks. And so we knew that the risk factors that we were looking at were accurate.
So through research and collaboration with community and collaboration with the women that were experiencing these risk factors, we were able to group them into 5 main categories. So you'll see up here we have substance use, mental health, physical health, intellectual impairment, and acute safety concerns. All of these categories have data points that we can find and locate within the HIFIS system that we can then pull out. So if we want to go in a little bit deeper into some of these categories, the data points that we have, specifically I want to focus on the acute safety concerns. Acute safety concern can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. We found it was things like transportation or a lack of transportation. If you don't have a safe way to travel, you are more likely to be at risk. If you are a new arrival to an area, or if you've been stranded in an area, you are more likely to be at risk. If you don't have access to finances, your own independent money, you are more likely to be at risk. We have physical health. If you have mobility concerns or health concerns, you are more likely to be at risk. Intellectual impairments, if you're having a hard time understanding whether or not you're in a dangerous situation or being able to understand the consequences of where you are, what's going on around you, you are more likely to be at risk. Each of these data points that are here are within the HIFIS system, and we pulled them out exactly as you can see them through our system. So some of the HIFIS modules that you used, specifically we used the admissions module where we accessed reasons for service at our drop-in centers, our safe and warm shelters, and we also used reasons for discharge. Our various factors module where you can identify watch concerns, risk factors, behavioral concerns, things that the community, the agencies, caseworkers, the people that know our women best, things that they saw that they think, okay, these are not just things that I know that I think everybody should know. I think these are the things that we're concerned could lead to risk, could lead to consequences we don't want to see. Also from the VI SPDAT and some of the questions that are answered and how they're answered there. We used all of this information to create a crystal report within HIFIS to generate a list of names. a list of names of people who are at the highest risk of becoming missing, murdered, or dying a preventable death. So our parameters for the report, time frame, maybe we want to look back last few months of who met these risk factors. Maybe we want to look back the last year, who met these risk factors. Age range, are we looking for youth? Are we looking for seniors? Who are we looking for right now? Housing status, the number of risk categories that an individual meets. So they meet all 5 categories, 4, 3, and the client state, whether or not they're active. We also use this report to look backwards at our history to see how accurate we were. And we looked back and saw whether or not these risk factors applied to people that were already passed. This is what the report's going to look like when we pull it out. Of course, this is a mock-up. I've used names from some of my favorite comic books. But this is essentially what it looks like. We've got risk scores at the top from 5s, right? People that meet all 5 of our risk categories. 4s, 4 of the risk categories, 3s, and downward. This is the report that we use to prioritize care. This is a report that we use to prioritize prioritize housing and protective factors. The people at the top of this list need us the most.
So what happened was we could predict, but what do you do if you keep predicting and they just keep dying, if you don't intervene, if you don't figure what's next? And so when we got funding through the Action Research and Chronic Homelessness Project, one of the things we did was we conducted interviews with 102 Indigenous folks who were experiencing homelessness or had been recently homeless in Brandon. And we asked them 2 things. Tell us your life story that led you into homelessness, and tell us the ideas or solutions that you have to address the challenges that you're seeing. And we had a wonderful amount of ideas and information that was given to our team from it, and we're testing out 8 of the ideas. The safe house I'm telling you about today is going to be one of the ideas. So many of the women that came through to us had safety concerns, but they also had ideas about things that would help make them safer and and solutions they had. And one of the first women we interviewed was a really bright woman named Chelsea, and she wanted to see the women gather and tell each other stories and befriend each other and do art together and connect with each other. And within about 2 months of us interviewing her, she had also died. So we named the project Chelsea's House after her. And we combined all of these ideas that the women gave us into a safe house that was to match what the women said they needed most and how they wanted it done out of these interviews. And so in May, so we conducted interviews from November to February. By May, we had opened the safe house. And this is Chelsea's house. And so it has 8 bedrooms plus a bachelor suite in the basement. And it's an old house that used to be a trap house. So lots of our folks had been trafficked out of there, had other things happen at this house before, and it was renovated to become this new safe house for the women. So the concept of it is that it's rooted in Indigenous cultural teachings and the 7 teachings. It's rooted in the ideas and the concepts that the women told us they needed. So some things are really basic. Some folks said they wanted to make sure they had washing machines and showers or places to store things. Lots of women said they wanted to eat together and learn how to cook. Lots of women wanted to do different kinds of arts and crafts or music or other types of activities. And so we tried to incorporate all of those ideas in it. And it's staffed 24 hours a day with aunties and cookums who help mentor and guide and auntie the women who are in the house. And so the root of it is, as you can see from the soil is like the cultural knowledge in the 7 teachings, then the ideas and the knowledge from the women that shared their ideas with us, and that what created the safe house. And the safe house is not just an isolated unit. There's all kinds of support services that come into the safe house. So the community nurses come in and provide support. The Women's Resource Center comes in. There's also community supports outside the safe house that help provide the supports that the women need. And one of the key things that we are focusing on here is adding protective factors to women's lives. So most of you are familiar with the VI SPDAT, and I'm sure some of you will roll your eyes if you see it, or we talk about it. And so we've come up with an opposite to the VI SPDAT. So I'll get my son to pass these around. So what it is it's called Holding Stones, and it's 23 stones that represent protective factors that make people safer. And if you can help the women increase their protective factors, then there'll be at less risk of being missing, murdered, or dying of preventable ailments. And you can also use it as a tool to assess how at risk somebody is and whether you're getting them safer and safer. So if at the time they only have a few stones, you know that they have high risks. But it's not as traumatizing as VI SPDAC, because you're not asking about everything that's wrong in their life. You're saying, look what's on this stone here. Do you have this in your life? Is this something you want in your life? Let's see if we can get it for you. And so in the branches, it's a little bit hard to see here, but it's the things that are on our stones include counseling, legal support, safety, harm reduction, clothing, advocates, no debt, income tax, phone, transportation, food, life skills, sleep, relationships, hygiene supplies, identification, healthcare, medications, culture or spirituality, income, positive activities, dental, and physical aids, which include things like glasses, walkers, hearing aids, anything like that, dentures, things like that might help people to be able to thrive. And what we've been finding in this safe house is that lots of the women there are really thriving. And in fact, quite a few of the women who have not done well in other projects, so they have only lasted in Housing First for days or weeks, or they've not lasted in other transitional units, or they've not lasted in programs to support people with intellectual disabilities, have actually done well in this house because they're surrounded with relationships and community and connection. And they've thrived in it as a result. And we've had lots of outcomes that we weren't expecting in terms of how well the women are doing with this. So all of this is still a work in progress. This is all very new. We're hoping to have a second house open soon. We're still working on the risk factors. We're still, helping to modify it and to adjust it as time goes on, so that we're better able to both assess the risks and to increase the protective factors. Is there anything else I've missed? No? Okay. I think that's... You good? I think so, yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna pass the mic on to the next group of people, and I'm happy to click through your presentation slides as well if you need. Would you folks want me to click through your slides? Yeah, or you can stand up here and click through it yourself. Totally. Do you want to sit over there? You just have to move. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Shannon Johansen, and I'm the Executive Director at Highbanks Society in Calgary, Alberta. I am a Cree Métis woman originating from the Red River settlement in Manitoba and part of Treaty 1 territory, and a humbled guest on Treaty 7 territory where I make my home. My Blackfoot name is Come Softly Singing Woman and was gifted to me by Elder Ruth Scalblock from Siksika Nation. I am in service to the clients I have had the privilege of working with this past decade, and my name encompasses that personal and professional life that I help to create a home for them to thrive in. My professional career has been shaped by numerous intersections, leading me to become the leader that I am today. I am honored to have received the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal, recognizing my leadership and contributions to the Indigenous youth of Calgary. One of the most rewarding experiences of my career has been my 6 years at Highbanks Society, where I started as a family support worker and worked my way up to be the executive director. And I'd like to introduce you now to my team lead here, Janine.
Hello, my name is Janine Sleiman, and I'm the family support team lead at Highbanks Society. My spirit name is Matsuapake, which means pretty woman, and that was also gifted to me by Elder Ruth Scalblock. I recently just graduated from the Bachelor in Child Studies at Mount Royal University, majoring in Child and Youth Care Counseling. I'm a Lebanese Muslim woman and community leader. My greatest accomplishment is completing my practicum at Highbanks Society and eventually transitioning into a family support worker and then now family support team lead. And I'm dedicated to advocacy and elevating voices of those who cannot always use their voices. And now for just a brief summary on what Highbanks is and what we do. Highbanks supports underserved women aged 16 to 24 who are pregnant or parenting, and often escaping domestic violence, poverty, or homelessness. These young mothers face significant challenges, including gang violence and involvement with the justice system, compounded by mental health issues exacerbated by the pandemic. Our holistic trauma-informed approach provides safe housing, educational opportunities, and life skill development, along with counseling and community support, all tailored to meet the specific goals of each family. By focusing on the mothers and their children's developmental needs, we help build resilience and set achievable goals. Ultimately, our efforts foster better educational outcomes and work toward breaking the intergenerational trauma.
So when I started working at Highbanks about 6 years ago, I found it really interesting that more than 50% of the population identified as being Indigenous, and we had no Indigenous program. So coming from an Indigenous background myself, we started to work really hard on how we were going to incorporate this into our daily work. And so what we've done is we've created the Highbanks Wheel. And it's based upon the Housing First Principles for Youth, which is the middle white circle you'll see, and it lists them all there. And then the outer circle, the colors, these are just our logo colors, but we wanted to keep in line with our logo and all of our program plans and that type of thing. So not only does it take into consideration the physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional self, we have 4 domains to our model that will also speak to those who are not of Indigenous culture and maybe still want to practice and move forward in a healthy way. And then we take into consideration the 7 sacred teachings, and then the outside circle where the green is our cultural touch points. And this is how we truly believe in how we work with each other, how we work with our youth. And it takes into consideration things like a rule of presence. So when our youth and their children come into our space, we stop what we're doing, we greet them, we ask them, how was school today? You know, did you have anything to eat today? And just really take the time to check in and make sure that they are doing okay.
I'm gonna just come down so I can see a little bit. So Highbanks has 3 program streams. The first one being Finding Shore, which is kind of the main focus of our presentation today. Finding Shore focuses on creating and fostering that stability for our moms as they come into the program. Many of them are coming directly from homelessness or addictions or gang violence, and so we believe that creating that stability is the most important first step. And that gives them about a year to kind of stabilize, and then they can transition into our Moving the Fulcrum program, which focuses on increasing positive supports, focusing on natural supports, and hopefully getting them, supporting them into getting back into school. And then we have our alumni program, which they call themselves the Alum Mums. And it's a program that focuses on peer-to-peer mentorship, and many of our alumni mums, which we'll talk about a little bit after, work on creating programs within Highbanks and encouraging each other.
So with our Moving the Fulcrum portion of our model, this was really the foundation of how Highbanks started about 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, there was a woman by the name of Bette Mitchell that started our organization because she was working with youth who were not completing their education because they had no housing. And so she started the whole organization literally out of her living room. We started with 5 apartments. 5 years ago when I started working at Highbanks, or 6 now, I had 5 families, 10 with the children, 10 clients. And now we've grown to 20 families, and just recently we were able to have a successful partnership with McMahon and Home Space, and we have 10 more units coming online in November, 10 more homes. So the focus of Highbanks truly is that we want to have our youth and their children find housing, have their basic needs met, have emotionally corrective experiences in real time, and then ideally go back to school. With the Moving the Fulcrum program, we started that program a year ago. We got the funding from the Building Safer Communities program through the federal government, and it really is to work with those moms that are at the highest risk. So the moms, one of the stories I can tell you now, one of the moms that just recently came into the program, she was part of Highbanks quite a few years ago. And then at that point in time, we didn't have 3 program streams. So if you weren't in school, then we were like, okay, well, we'll try and get you a house somewhere else and kind of move on. So she's now come back into our newest program, which doesn't have any of those barriers. We've removed all of those barriers so that they can just come in, have some help right off the bat, get some support for themselves and their children, and then take a whole year to figure out who you are and where you want to go and what does your journey look like. And so for this mom, when she came back, she sadly had been recruited into a pretty serious sex trafficking organization, and she was really not doing very well. Physically and mentally, she was struggling. And coming back to Highbanks was a really big risk for her. It's taking that and admitting that you need help again. And with this new program that she's never experienced before, we just wrapped her in love and said, how can we help? It took us about 2 months to get her housed, but we finally have her housed. Took about that long for us to get her some income, but we have that. We got her some immediate dental help because she had some pretty bad abscesses in her mouth. We got her son back into school. So a lot of really positive things within a 2-month time frame. Normally, what we're seeing within the first year of this pilot program with Finding Shore is that it's not taking that full year for the moms to decide to go back to school. It's taking about 3 to 6 months, which we were pretty surprised about. That's a development that we weren't expecting. So, like I said, 2 months, and she's already talking to us about where she could potentially go to school in January, with her dream being wanting to work at actually Eleanor's house in Calgary, which works with sex trafficked youth. So the program has actually had quite good success, and we're just really happy to finally have the ability to serve in a way that doesn't have the barrier of if you're not doing this and this and this, then we can't help you.
And so with the Finding Shore model, some of the core aims are prevention and intervention, and that's kind of what Shannon was talking about. Promote resilience and healthier life choices, and then reduce gang involvement and becoming crime involved. Many of our families have high scores of ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. And so what we try to do is encourage more of the PACEs, which are protective and compensatory experiences. With that, the goals of the program are secure housing stability, education and career planning, and then to eventually graduate into Moving the Fulcrum, which I would say about 80% of our moms do graduate into Moving the Fulcrum. To add to this, as you guys can see the picture, this is one of the units in our on-site building. What we try to do whenever we move somebody in is make a home for them. And that's furnishing the unit, making sure everything is available to them. We always like to throw in a little gift too, maybe like a baby blanket or something like that. We actually just had a mom move in this past weekend, and she and her baby have been homeless since baby was born, and baby is 10 months old. And so when she moved in this past weekend, it was just emotions and she had a hard time kind of grasping the concept of the fact that she now has a home and a place that she can call home. And that was very rewarding, especially for the mom that previously lived in that unit, because she helped us furnish it and was able to introduce the unit to our new mom. So that was beautiful.
So in 2012, 2022, we started a program called the Alum Mums. And this program started because generally with Highbanks previously, youth would be able to be in the programs from the ages of 16 to 24 and or as long as they were in school. If either one of those things happened, they turned 25 or they finished school, then they were just automatically graduated or exited from our program. And so when I started working at Highbanks, I had two of the moms come up to me and they said, if I leave this program, I'm not going to make it. I'm not ready yet. I still need help. Is there any way you can still help me? So we applied for some funding, and through the City of Calgary Home Grant, we did receive funding to start the Alum Mums. We had 3 mums right off the bat who entered that program. And it's been some years of learning and rolling that program out, but originally it started that they would host a programming night, 1 a month, and they would take turns. And so we'd bring them all together, that we'd have a big feast, and then those alum moms would do some type of educational, natural support, community building session. And then that started to get to be a little too much because we were doing programming 2 nights a week, and these are all youth that are going to school and have children. So we revisited the Alum Mum program, and now it's become more of a peer-to-peer mentorship program. They do a lot of really fun community development activities, Halloween and what are they? Galentine's Day. Yeah, sorry, I knew there was a special name for it. They do the Christmas party. So they do all of the things that bring community together in a really fun way. So right now, today actually, as we speak, they are making slippers for their indoor shoes at Highbanks, and they're decorating them and bedazzling them and putting a whole bunch of feathers on them, and that's what they do. They come together as community. And the friendships that they are developing are incredible. And now we have moms that are aspiring to want to join the Alum Mum program, to the point where we've had to start to do like an interview process and really screen to make sure that they are ready to be in that type of a leadership role, because it's not just a participant in a program anymore. Now they're literally taking on, they're like staff. They work alongside us and do just as much activities as we do with our clients. So it's been a very, very amazing contribution to our program. And now we can honestly say you can come to Highbanks, you can access services regardless of where you're at in your journey, and you can stay for as long as you need to stay. Because once you're done Alum Mum, because we've extended the age to 30, which is kind of the cap for youth, now they're just graduating into just being an ongoing volunteer. So we've had one mom, the longest she's been with us now is 12 years, and she was the one that said, please, is there something else you can do to help?
Just some statistics and data from our quarterly surveys. So we do these surveys every quarter based on the program plans that we do throughout that semester. The question for these was, I feel that programming and support I receive at Highbanks allows me to feel connected to my community and neighbors, which was rated at 76%, and plan for my future, which was rated at 100%, and then find support and services when I need them, which was also rated at 100%. And this shows in real time how positively these programs are impacting our moms and how they do feel like they're benefiting from the support that they're receiving and that they actually can take that next step into independent living.
Okay. I think I already talked about this one. I did. But this is one of our activities for National Indigenous Peoples Day. We bring everyone together and we put up the Highbanks teepee, and we have the dancers and the elders and everyone come, and it's just a really nice, fun way to spend a day in community. This coming year, we want to paint the teepee with hands all around the bottom. We were speaking with our elder about it, and she just thought, you know, with what we do with our women and children, that we're impacting 2 generations, that it would be important to capture that. And what better way than to have our handprints on our teepee.
So this past spring, we developed the Highbanks Eviction Prevention Workbook. And this workbook is meant to support our family support workers and our clients in our care management meetings. So all of our family support workers meet with their clients on a weekly basis and then a monthly basis in home. So the workbook aims to kind of help our moms learn the life skills and the management and kind of that stepping stone into motherhood. So we have tenant rights and responsibilities, which was kind of derived from the Rent Smart. We have fostering connections, again, conflict management, guest management when having your own home, financing skills, budgets are a really important thing in our program. Home care skills, learning how to clean, learning how to, how often should I be cleaning? When should I be cleaning the washroom, for example? Meal planning, and then growing into motherhood. Many of our moms, they're young, it's their first time becoming a mom, so there's that kind of searching for guidance. And so there's a hope and an aim that we can support them through that. And then worksheets and exercises, and those are things that our family support workers can pull from to support them in creating that budget or checking in on their goals and whatnot.
And the really nice thing about this workbook is we developed it with the elders and with some psychologists that work with our moms on a regular basis. So here's some examples of some goals, and you can go through each 4 domains of the model. So similarly, if you want to use the medicine wheel, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, you can, or you can use our model legends, which is well-being, connection, expression, and vocation. Each one of these builds on another. So under the well-being category, when they are first admitted, we start to look at, you know, are they able to determine their personal wants and needs, and go through each one of those levels. And then at the end of achieving a section, you know, they get there's like a reward process. So but it's not necessarily a reward as in like, here's your new blanket. It's more of like a fill your bucket type of reward. It's something that speaks to them spiritually, something that connects them to the land and that kind of thing. So there's so many sections to these creating of goals, and it starts really at the very basics, the very foundation of life skills, and then builds on that more and more until they can identify themselves as like a leader for the alumni program.
So within Highbanks, we work through a trauma-informed care approach in everything that we do. We believe that it is the most important way to create trust and resilience within our families. And so we do this by, first and foremost, understanding trauma, hearing their story, getting kind of a background idea of what has happened to you, not what's wrong with you. Creating a safe environment. We have a trauma-informed care space. We keep in mind keeping it clean, keeping it smelling good. We always have food out. We always have coffee available. Building trust, whether that's going for a walk with a mom to the pharmacy or holding baby for her while she takes a shower. Anything that can be done to promote that trust and let them know that we're here for them and we care about them and we want the best for them. And then empowerment and choice. Mama knows best. She knows what's best for her child. She knows what's going to support her and her child best. All we can do is support them and give them that choice and that empowerment to do so. Next is collaboration and support. So working with other agencies in the city that can support them in any way. There's the Alex Youth Care Bus or Care Center, which we send multiple referrals to, and connecting with other agencies that can support them in any way. We also have holistic care. We are a wraparound support agency, whether it's rapid access to counseling, just being a shoulder to cry on, whatever it is, we will get it done. Continuous improvement on the staff side. We are constantly learning and seeking and trying to be better. We've currently worked on implementing trauma-informed care training for all of our staff, as well as the brain story. And then unconditional love is, I think, a core characteristic of Highbanks. We wrap our moms in love no matter what it is. If they had a hard day from school, we're gonna sit with them and talk about it. We're gonna buy them a coffee. Whatever it is, we will wrap them in love and keep it unconditional. And this is Highbanks. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Renee Sanderson. I am from Treaty 8 territory, and I belong to the McKenzie Rebecca First Nation. I am the Executive Director for the Yellowknife Women's Society and have been in that position for over 2 years.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Lee. I'm from Toronto, and I'm here with Renee today. I work for an organization called Springboard Policy. We work with great organizations like Yellowknife Women's Society to create better public policy. So I helped Renee write the report we're going to talk to you about today.
Thank you. So in 2024, the Yellowknife Women's Society released a comprehensive report titled Overpoliced and Underprotected. It addressed the systematic challenges faced by marginalized populations in Yellowknife, particularly Indigenous and racialized women. The report sheds light on the disproportion between policing, surveillance, and criminalization experienced by vulnerable community members, including those experiencing homelessness, substance use, and mental health issues.
I think it's still you if you want. I can. Sure. This is just, we're going to get to these a bit later. We just wanted to briefly sort of highlight the main recommendations that came out of the report. Two main things: the RCMP need to do less in Yellowknife. So the woman we spoke to there called for different social services that aren't provided by the police, and then that they need to do better in Yellowknife. So we'll get to more of that later, but I'll pass back to you to talk about.
So Yellowknife Women's Society is a community-based organization dedicated to improving the social, economic, and cultural well-being of of vulnerable adults in Yellowknife, with a primary focus on adult men and women experiencing homelessness, poverty, and social exclusion. YKWS provides a range of essential services, including emergency shelters, housing support, and mental health support, also with cultural programming. The Society also advocates for a systematic change to address the root causes of inequality and to improve access to health and social services to the community's most needed members. YKWS remains committed to promoting safety, resilience, and empowerment for individuals navigating the complexities in their life in Yellowknife.
All good? Great. Okay, so I just want to briefly talk a bit about the project that we worked on together and that we're going to be talking about today, the RCMP report, we call it for short. But this project sort of came to be because the relationship between unhoused Indigenous women in Yellowknife and the RCMP there, that's their main community police, has been strained for a very long time. a consistent sort of challenge in Yellowknife. And so YKWS applied for some funding from Women and Gender Equality Canada, so WAGE, to write a report that sort of assessed the different issues that are sort of influencing this relationship and come up with some recommendations to improve it. And so that's sort of where I came in to help Renee write the report. And so the final product was a 100-page report that we released this year in April. The report was informed by a range of different things: literature review, jurisdictional scan, and interviews and sharing circles that I'll get to in a second. But the main goal really was to come out with some meaningful recommendations for policy change. So we really didn't want this to be a report that sat on a shelf. We wanted it to be a report that actually made a difference in Yellowknife and hopefully in other communities across the country. So this is just kind of a list of things that we did to write the report. So the first thing was a review of academic and grey literature. And so most of that literature review helped us to talk about the history of the RCMP in Yellowknife and the Northwest Territories and the issues between these two groups that we're talking about. We also did a jurisdictional scan, so we looked at other countries across the world that have Indigenous populations and have some similar challenges between Indigenous people and their police, and we wanted to see if they were doing anything interesting that we could learn from. We also did some on-background research interviews with people in the community. So we spoke with the RCMP. We wanted it to be a balanced report, and we wanted to give them a chance to have some input. We also spoke with service providers, other community-based organizations beyond Yellowknife Women's Society, and other stakeholders in Yellowknife to really understand what was happening on the ground and to see if they had any ideas for solutions that could improve the relationship with the RCMP. And the main thing that informed the report and sort of a lot of the different recommendations were 2 sharing circles that we held in Yellowknife with the Yellowknife Women's Society with women who had previously been or were currently unhoused or precariously housed. It's a little bit more about those sharing circles. We had 2 conversations over 2 days with over 30 women that participated. We welcomed them in with coffee and a traditional breakfast with bannock and fresh jam, and opened the circles with a smudging ceremony and an opening prayer, closed them in the same way. We and invited everyone to stay for a lunch. We wanted it to be a comfortable, culturally appropriate, and a safe space for women to share, because we were talking about really challenging experiences in their lives, and so we wanted to make sure that they felt safe. We also had counseling on site if they were interested in talking to somebody about what they're feeling after sharing their experiences with us. And now I just want to briefly sort of highlight some of the issues that we wrote about in the report before we get to what we heard from the sharing circles and some of the recommendations in the report. And so obviously we could speak for a really long time about the different factors that shape this relationship. But to put it sort of plainly, we borrowed this concept of over-policing and under-protection. So the RCMP in Yellowknife is filling a lot of different gaps in social services. This is probably something everyone's familiar with across Canada. It's kind of a common theme. They're doing things that they're not necessarily equipped to do or wanting to do even, or trained to do. And as a result, this means that women are interacting with the police when they don't need to be. And it results in over-criminalization. And at the same time, when thinking about underprotection, when women need protection, sometimes they need to be able to call somebody for help. They don't always get the help they need because the woman we spoke with shared that they don't trust the RCMP for many different reasons to keep them safe. And so they fear being dismissed or belittled, not being taken seriously, and being harmed by the police, either because they have in the past or they know someone who has, and for many other different reasons as well. And based on what we know about victimization and intimate partner violence in Yellowknife, we know that, and we heard that women need to have a safe place to call for help when they need help. But when they don't have that safe place in the police, they need someplace else to go to, and they don't necessarily have that. All right. Okay, and this slide here is essentially just saying that these are not new issues. These are probably issues that everyone is familiar with, and they've been written about many times. There are many different reports and many different recommendations that have come from every level of government, including the federal government, and yet this is still, a major issue, and the relationship between unhoused Indigenous women and the police is still defined by violence, mistrust, lack of accountability, etc. And so just wanted to kind of use a few stats to highlight maybe the gravity of the issues in Yellowknife and in Northwest Territories and across Canada. 90% of the women who are homeless in Yellowknife are Indigenous. This is compared to an almost 50-50 split between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in Yellowknife and the Northwest Territories. Just Yellowknife. And 80% of those experiencing chronic homelessness in Yellowknife attended residential schools. Over half of Indigenous women in the 3 territories in Canada have reported experiencing intimate partner violence since the age of 15. The Northwest Territories is the most policed jurisdiction in Canada, so that just means they have the most officers to citizen ratio in Canada. There's a stat here, 428 officers to 100,000 people compared to 181 in the rest of Canada. So there are a lot of police in the Northwest Territories. And final stat here is 100% of all women incarcerated in Northwest Territories are Indigenous, again, compared to the actual makeup of the population, which is 50-50 approximately. So that's just a brief overview. Obviously, we could talk forever about the issues, but I'll pass it off to Renee again.
So what we heard from the sharing circles, we had 2 sharing circles, and we wanted to provide that safe place where we can invite the women to come and share their stories. In working in this organization, you would hear stories, but it wasn't until we met into groups and actually heard the stories from the women to realize how prevalent it was. Everyone in that room had a story. Everyone in that room had more than one story to share. There were common themes that emerged from these sharing circles, experiences on being overpoliced and underprotected, and they spoke about feelings about being targeted and watched by the police. They felt underprotected, expressed that they often felt unsafe and unsupported when they were asking for support from the police, felt judged and mistreated, racial discrimination and systematic bias. Many Indigenous women recounted incidents where they were mistreated, weren't treated fairly, the impact on their mental health and trauma, feelings of fear, anxiety, and hopelessness, and intensifying their traumas. The sharing circles underscored the need of trauma-informed approaches and cultural safety. These voices captured in the sharing circles reflected the lived realities that most are affected by overpoliced and underprotected, and that they guide the recommendations that are outlined in this report.
Okay, and here we pulled a few different quotes from those sharing circles that we had permission to share, just to sort of highlight those themes that Renee just shared. So first quote about police being unnecessarily rough with people downtown. We heard that consistently throughout both sharing circles. I think the second quote here, at least to help me understand, it really helps me understand the core issue, which is, they're there when you don't need them, and when you do need them, they're nowhere around. That was kind of a common sentiment throughout. And the third quote here is kind of highlighting a lot of the different biases that exist and the racism that exists in Yellowknife, people being treated poorly because they assume, or you are an alcoholic Indigenous because they're homeless, they're street people, their words, they don't feel that, what's happening to them matters as much as, compared to somebody else. Right. Okay, so we want to briefly talk about the report recommendations that came out of this research and these conversations with women in Yellowknife. And these recommendations fell under two kind of main goals or main buckets. The first is to fix social services to reduce contact between the RCMP and unhoused Indigenous women in Yellowknife. So basically having the police do less and filling gaps with people that are trained to, address things like mental health issues, et cetera. Filling those gaps with the right people versus having the RCMP function as many different people. And then the second is to fix policing and address the underprotection and overpolicing of Indigenous women in Yellowknife. And so the second bucket is really targeted changes to the policing, the way they operate. So we'll get into those a little bit here. And how are we doing for time? We're okay. I'll try to be fast then. I'm not gonna, it's a long report. Within each recommendation there are more, but I'll stay high level. Okay, so the first, under fixing social services, we said to increase the supply of shelter spaces and supportive housing. That was something we read and heard a lot, to reduce contact with police. Second, improve the hours and capacity of a mobile and crisis response team to reduce contact with the police. Again, provide in-territory Indigenous-led mental health and addiction services and victim services to reduce contact with the police. And then finally, define, coordinate, and create accountabilities for an all-of-government approach to supporting unhoused Indigenous women in the territory and in Yellowknife specifically. And then in the second bucket here, kind of addressing policing and challenges within policing. There was a lot to say here. We tried to organize things and come up with some productive and ideas to work within the existing framework. So the first, undertake a comprehensive review of policing in the Northwest Territories. That was something that we saw other jurisdictions do, and some positive things came out of it. So in Northwest Territories, to think about what the community actually needs and shape the police from there. Community safety professionals, so that's something that has been piloted in the Northwest Territories and other jurisdictions across Canada, who are resourced to have to collaborate with Indigenous leaders and to meet people where they are and meet their needs in a different way than having police officers walking around. Improve the RCMP service delivery in Yellowknife through better training, training being like cultural training and et cetera, trauma-informed training. Maybe tangentially, we spoke with the RCMP and they said, we have these modules that we make everyone run through, but I think what we heard is that there's a lot more to be done than maybe what they're doing, what they suggest that they are doing. In addition, specifically for improving the RCMP service delivery, more ambitious community integration. So there was this common sense that RCMP, they come in for a short period of time. They're not from Yellowknife and they don't necessarily integrate with the community, and it sort of feels like us versus them. So there's more to be done there. Targeted recruitment of more Indigenous people in the police service if they're interested, and reducing barriers to becoming an RCMP officer if they want to be. Other recommendations within that bucket, but I'll move on. Improving the RCMP's accountability mechanisms, and that was a big one. At a national and territorial level, just to summarize, the existing accountability mechanisms aren't working really, and so they need to be fixed. And then empowering Indigenous women in Yellowknife to advocate for themselves by giving them more opportunities to speak to each other and advocate for themselves when things are going wrong, with hopefully stronger accountability mechanisms when they do speak out, and through education and resources and things like that.
So I'll just quickly go through what happened since. So we gathered, the report received widespread media coverage across Canada. Here's a few examples of them. We did do a follow-up meeting with the RCMP and other NGOs and other agencies. That meeting was met with what's the word I want to say? Some challenges. The police questioned the conclusions. We said that we were putting them in a negative light, and basically these changes that we're presenting needs to be done from a higher up, and that there's no changes on their end that needs to be done. Since then, we had met with our premier and other allies to advocate for the CRCC to have it to review the RCMP in Yellowknife and Northwest Territories, and that is still work in progress. We have also applied for funding, so then we can keep this advocacy work going and ensure that our recommendations are being addressed, and that there is the CRCC review, and again, that this report's not sitting on a shelf 10 years from now. This report also is on our website. It's www.ykws.ca if you want to have a look at it. It's long, but I encourage you to have a look. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of the presenters. We have around 15 minutes for questions within the room, and then I do encourage people to hopefully come and approach you if you have further questions. So if there is any questions, I can bring the mic over to you. I see one hand here. Okay, there's a bunch. I'll try my best. And if you can keep your questions short, that would be great.
Hey, so I have a question for the first group of presenters and for the second group. For the first group, it says on your timeline in 2023 that you started your work for unhoused Indigenous women in risk of death. So you mentioned seeing this for about 25 years, so I'm wondering why did it take so long for you to get to that point, to start creating resources for them and to help them? And for the second group, they said that they're trauma-informed, so I want to know if they help with ingrained behaviors that the mothers may have from how they were raised that may be passed on to their children if they implement that behavior, especially if they're more resistant to trying therapy. Do you help with that long-term? How does that work?
I just request the answers to be concise as well.
So I started working as an outreach worker 25 years ago, and we have had interventions all along. So the shift for us was that we have in Brandon 50,000 people, and so far this year we've had over 800 homeless, and by the time we include women experiencing domestic violence, about 2% of our population, or a little bit more than 2% of our population, will be homeless this year. And so the needs are far exceeding any kind of capacity we have and funding we have. And so it's gotten to the point where we've had to prioritize which ones are at highest risk because we don't have enough to help everybody do everything they need. Our vacancy rate's at 1 or 2% right now, something like that. And so there's been programs all along, but at this point we're seeing in Brandon and in other parts of Manitoba and across the prairies, our Indigenous women are at such high risk. And seeing that and realizing that there's certain ones that are at more risk than others. And so if we can try to catch those ones, but this is a last-ditch attempt. The other work that we've been doing as developing a whole spectrum of interventions, and this is end-of-the-line interventions. Really, we start from childhood, the stuff that you're talking about, those babies having a good start, those babies being able to stay with mom, all the way into interventions is young people, interventions when before they're homeless so that they can stay housed, interventions when they're first homeless, before it becomes chronic. And so this is just another line, but it's just those really high risk ones.
To answer your question, yes, we do. At Highbanks, and some of the things we didn't get to telling you today is we have a very holistic approach to everything we do. So not only do our youth have opportunities to access rapid access to mental health supports and or elder counseling that we fundraise for, so we don't get any funding for that. We also have children's play and art therapy with therapists that specialize in childhood trauma. And then we complement that with those play therapists coming in to do some direct one-on-one parenting skill building, I guess you could say. And then I myself have some parenting experience when I was a home visitor. We're a very small agency, so there's 7 staff members, so I do a lot of frontline work myself that way as well. So it's just, it's all encompassing, and I guess long answer short, yes, we do as much of that intergenerational work as we can, but in more of a preventative way than to cause more harm. Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, because we work with youth that have children, right? And youth that are fleeing situations that are not always safe or okay. We have youth that will relapse after admission into the program, and we do everything that we possibly can to help them get back on track. And if they don't embrace that, then we have no choice but to call Children's Services, because at that point in time, the most vulnerable person in that situation is that baby, right? But we offer so many other things first. We offer elder counseling. We have an addictions counselor coming in that specializes in Indigenous addictions counseling. We offer them treatment. We, like, so many different steps or ways, but yeah, when we look at things, it's definitely all-encompassing with a very keen eye on who's most vulnerable in that situation. And also our program works because the moms that have come into Finding Shore in this past year, in our first year of running that program, 3 out of the 3 that had open Children's Services files had them all closed, and the mom stayed with the child stayed with mom.
Awesome. I'll maybe go to the back because I don't want to miss folks, and then I'll come back again. I'll come back to the front again. Do we have anybody at the back? We have one over there. We have one over there as well. Okay, I'm trying my best. And also, like, if the panelists can also keep the answers concise, and for follow-up, we can have a conversation after the session as well.
Egosani, for all your beautiful work. I don't know, it's fantastic. First and foremost, this being a national space of Canada, right now, well, more to Canada, and it being a bigger women's issue, we know that all of these resources and the reports that are getting done are a continuum that have been going on for 20 plus 50 years, et cetera. We know that, especially with Indigenous women. And so my question would be, is that how and what are we doing with all the organizations? So there was one that was the National Indigenous Homeless Council here, that's somewhere in the spaces today, and then also the Women's National Housing and Homeless Network. I might have misused those words. With your policing systems and every one of your programs, is there an Indigenous Advisory Council that they are responsible to report to? Because I know the RCMP within Yellowknife have one, and they only report there bi-monthly if they do, and they only actually do it maybe once a year, those jackasses. Sorry for those in the room, because I don't like it. So what are, and if you're in the room, line up. So those that, for all of your programs, what are your relationships with the police systems within your communities, and or the RCMP within your communities? What are the Indigenous Advisory Community Councils that they're responsible? And if you have one, if not, what can we do to make sure all of us throughout Canada have one and we mimic it, however that looks per territory? Because I've been doing this for a little long, and I keep hearing this stuff. 20 years ago, I heard the same thing. And 20 years ago, I can't imagine the numbers of ladies we've lost. But is there any way that the national networks that are here today, how do we report to them individually on the HIFIS that's working and all those things? How do we collectively do that? But my biggest thing is, do you all have Indigenous advisory councils to all your policing systems?
Any
I can't
panelists?
answer what the advisory councils are for the Calgary Police Service. I know that we do have some very positive relationships with our community resource officers, and we do that intentionally so that our young moms can have different experiences with police in a more positive way, because they do have trauma from their own childhoods, or just when they were involved in gang life, or that type of thing. So we try to counteract that with a much more positive experience with police, and also so their children don't grow up afraid. So that's what we try to do as far as Indigenous councils and that. I sit on a couple within the Calgary region, so we do work together as a community of support to one another.
Anybody else on the panel want to take that question?
We have a good relationship with our community police officers in the Brandon Police Service. There is still some problematic folks within the Brandon Police Service, but our Indigenous community police officers have been wonderful with our safe house and have been great with the women.
Is this one? Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah, you mentioned that they do exist in Yellowknife. There is or for the Northwest Territories. I think something that we heard was just having something exist maybe isn't necessarily always enough, and I think something that needs to that was sort of a consistent thing we heard about that, and about things like training and like a long list of things that exist on paper. I think something we heard and something we recommended was reviewing those things and making sure that they're doing what they're intended to do, and paying the most attention to the outcomes, and whether or not something like a council is actually whether or not the recommendations that they're making are actually being implemented. I think that's important.
Thank you. I have time for 2 more questions. I'll do one more in the back and one more in, I know there's 4. I'll try to do one more in the front. We have to close at 3.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Shayla. I'm Métis. I work with Inuit, Puktuti Inuit Women of Canada. I just wanted to go back to the analogy of the cliff at the beginning that was used, and say, I think it's a really important part of this conversation, particularly in spaces like this where Indigenous isn't the main line of the event, to keep it part of our conversation that cliff is not a natural feature. It was built. It's called settler colonialism, and it's being rebuilt every day. And when we look at all of the work that we're doing across all of our spaces, what are we doing to chip away at that cliff? What are we doing to take it down? Because that's the long run and the long goal. And I just want to say to the question about RCMP, as a national organization, I've been meeting bi-weekly with the RCMP Indigenous Relations Office, and I skipped it today for this conference because this is more useful. I think it's really time that we come to terms with the fact that the RCMP is a paramilitary. It was built as a colonial response and an colonial enforcement institution, and we don't really need it anymore.
Any responses from the panel before we go to our last question? Anything to add?
She said it perfectly.
Huh? Perfect? Okay. One more question here, and then I'd have to redirect the rest of the questions straight to the panel, if that's okay.
I have a couple questions, if that's okay. The second one is so fast. My first question is for Megan and Rebecca. An observation that I have as a frontline worker is I see young girls that have been involved in trafficking, and they wouldn't have a lot of engagement with HIFIS because we see them pop up for a couple weeks, but then they end up reconnecting with their trafficker and relying really heavily on their trafficker. And so they wouldn't engage with community services very often. Is there anything that flags individuals without a lot of updates on HIFIS as higher risk? Because I think that some of our highest risk individuals are people that don't engage with services very often for a lot of reasons.
So lots of our frontline workers will actually, we've adapted our drop-down menus under contributing factors and various factors so that we can actually flag them as at risk of being trafficked, so that it's a specific risk. And we also enter information about who has trafficked them or who they've had protection orders against and information like that. And it has enabled us in my previous incarnation before this research to go and get young women and girls out of situations because we have that information in the database. And so we can flag them even if they're not there often. That's why Rebecca was talking about the different time frames. Sometimes we need to go back a little bit because they've been away for a while. But asking that question, where are they and how come they've been away?
And we also have a really tight-knit community for our coordinated access, which is a lot of different kinds of agencies working on HIFIS in different kinds of ways. So we adapt HIFIS to the agency as opposed to the other way around. So when all these agencies come together once weekly, if there's someone that hasn't been that's on our by name list or that's been in our system that hasn't been there in a while, we bring them up as a special feature of that meeting. And if nobody has seen them, that's when we start to act to try to find them, even if it includes involving the police.
Thank you. And my second question was for Shanna and Janine. I was wondering if it's possible if your eviction prevention workbook is a resource that's shareable to anyone else. I thought it looked really interesting, and if it was possible to share with others, that would be cool.
Yeah, we were actually going to bring it with us, but we forgot. But
I don't see why not.
Yeah, I don't see why not. If you want, come chat with me after, and I can give you my business card.
Oh,
and that
really
goes for anybody. It is thick. It's a thick one. But yeah, we forgot to bring it. Sorry.
Hi, Ani Bourgeois. For the first folks that were speaking in regards to data, my question is about the risk factors you were talking about and HIFIS. I used to work in AHT for several years, and I worked a lot with Indigenous women. My concern was always regarding HIFIS is that though it's great to use to collect data, what about folks that are perpetrators or predators on that system? And how do we lessen those risk factors in itself? Have you thought of that? And what are you doing to prevent all of the data that absolutely anybody can go into on HIFIS, regardless of their school or regardless of where they are? Like, we have folks with lived experience. We have folks that can just, wherever you are in an agency, look up on HIFIS these folks that are very high at risk, like you said, based on your data, and look at those risk factors and know and kind of pick them out. How are we reducing that, and how are you reducing that?
So you mean like in terms of HIFIS users misusing
HIFIS users. So you're stating that you're using HIFIS for all of these risk factors, adding in this data, collecting this data, but perpetrators can also do that. How are you reducing that, and what are you doing to use that kind of
Yeah. Okay. So I think I get you what you mean here. So, so it's important to understand how HIFIS works, and that we can limit, first of all, only people that are in our networks and are employed full time in our networks are able to access HIFIS. We can also limit which modules they can access depending on what type of work they're doing. And we can also limit who they can see. So if you're a youth worker, we can limit it to that. And we can also limit within agencies, between agencies, so that certain data can't be shared between agencies. And we also have Rebecca, who is the ultimate Nancy Drew spy, watching over the whole thing. So if somebody's looking at a client that doesn't belong to them or anything like that, she will be able to tell because everything is documented that happens in HIFIS. So I think that one of the misconceptions of HIFIS is that it's a free-for-all, and that if you give one person access, they can see everybody's everything data, and that's not the case at all. There's only certain features that you can see, and you can lock down who can see what, when, and who can watch, who's watching over what's happening with it. And so we've had very little problems with accessing data.
We also have policies and protocols. If there was a breach, or even if we suspect that there was some sort of data breach and someone was accessing data that they shouldn't be. And the report that we put up on the screen, that can only be accessed by a few individuals within the agencies where it's necessary.
I'm gonna actually have to close the session now. I know there's so many more questions, conversations. I do encourage people to approach panelists if they have further questions. I want to thank everyone for taking the time and enjoy your break. Thanks, everyone.